Hey everyone, it's Mariana, and we have a lot to talk about in this Game of Thrones episode recap and review. We are officially halfway through this season, and things just keep getting crazier. As always, these recaps are full of spoilers, so make sure you're caught up on the show before watching the rest of this video. So Season 6, Episode 5, The Door, is yet another episode that opens at Castle Black. Sansa receives a letter from Peter Baelish and goes to meet him in Molestown, where she really makes things awkward for him. She wants him to understand how much Ramsay hurt her and how angry she is, despite him trying to tell her that he did not know about Ramsay. She makes him guess what he did to her, and she tells him, "You freed me from the monsters who murdered my family, and you gave me to other monsters who murdered my family." I'm so proud of Sansa in this scene. But Peter does manage to tell her that her uncle Brynden Blackfish was able to retake River Run, and there is an army available there, so they would probably help Sansa take back Winterfell. Later in the episode, as Sansa, Jon, Davos, and a few other people are discussing how best to take back Winterfell, Sansa does tell them this new information, but she lies about how she found out about it. And it does make me wonder why she lied specifically to Jon. It is possible that she just lied because there were a bunch of people at the table she doesn't know very well, and maybe if it was only Jon, she would have told him, because they do seem to have a pretty warm relationship at this point. She even made him a cloak to look like the one that Ned Stark used to wear. On the other hand, there is that quick moment where she says she has the Stark name, implying that the northern houses would follow her as a Stark, but then quickly redirects the conversation, talking about how Jon is as much of a Stark as Ramsay is a Bolton. So it's possible that she only is trying to say what needs to be said in order for her to play the game properly. Who knows? Either way, she sends Brienne to talk to Blackfish, and the rest of the group looks like they are going to rally some of the northern houses. Side note, I really liked that moment when Ed finally realized that he is in charge of Castle Black, because one of the crows comes up to him, addresses him as the Lord Commander, asks him if they should close the gate now, and Ed tries to say, "I'm not your Lord Commander," but then realizes that Jon is officially gone now, so I guess he is in charge. I thought it was a pretty cute and funny moment. At the House of Black and White, Arya continues her training, and to be honest, it kind of looks like she was better at it when she was blind, because last time when they were fighting she was blind and she managed to hit the waif, but that's what's happening, and Sexy Jesus shows up and takes her to the Hall of Faces, tells her a bit about the first Faceless Men, which was really cool. I love finding out more backstory about everything that's going on and where these groups originated. But more importantly, he gives her a mission. She is to assassinate this actress, and before she leaves, she is told that she was given a second chance and there will not be a third. Afterwards, we see Arya watch this really awkward performance that pretty much mockingly recaps the events of the first couple of seasons of Game of Thrones that took place at King's Landing. It also mocks her father, which she clearly is not happy about. I'm not sure if some of this is news to her or if she knows everything that they are talking about, particularly with Sansa marrying Tyrion, but either way, it clearly stirs some emotions in her, and it is obvious that no matter how many times she says that she is no one, she is still Arya Stark, and we remember that she didn't throw away Needle. After the performance, Arya goes to the backstage area where the actors are to spy on them, and specifically to spy on the actress that she needs to kill. And that's also when the audience gets this really in-your-face shot of male nudity, which I thought was entirely unnecessary, but I guess that's Game of Thrones for you. Actually, that's not Game of Thrones. You know what? I think most of the nudity in this show is actually serving some kind of purpose. It advances the storyline, whereas this particular shot had no purpose whatsoever, didn't need to be there. It was just there because HBO, I guess. So I'm not particularly mad about it, I just thought it was really random. Anyway, moving on, Arya goes back to the House of Black and White and talks to Sexy Jesus about how she's going to assassinate this woman, but then also wants to know who wants her dead and why, to which he pretty much tells her that a servant doesn't ask questions, which is what she's supposed to be. And I have to say, this was the first time that I really felt like Arya may actually leave the House of Black and White and not continue her training to be a professional assassin, because Arya does not seem like a character who would just blindly, no pun intended, follow orders. And I'm not going to lie, I do kind of want her to leave and just take her training and use it to her advantage, because it was pretty satisfying to see her accomplish some revenge when she killed Meryn Trant last season. And she's been stuck in Braavos, pretty much removed from all of the other storylines for a while now, so I think it's time to move on. I guess we'll find out soon what she meant when she was told a girl must decide if she wants to serve the many-faced god, and she replied, a girl has decided. Could go either way. At Pike, the Kingsmoot was a bit of a disappointment for me. It was a much more epic event in the book. It felt bigger, it felt more important, there were more people involved, but most importantly, the outcome of this Kingsmoot was nowhere near as obvious from the very beginning as it was in the show. Because in the show, we got this character introduced to us and he kills Balon, and then they have to vote for a leader, and it was a bit too obvious, because if he didn't win the Kingsmoot, then he was kind of a pointless character to introduce to begin with. So even though the result is the same in the book and in the show, I thought this was one of those things that just didn't translate nearly as well as I wanted it to from page to screen. Here we have Yara making her claim, then Theon gives her his support as the heir of Balon, then Euron makes his claim and openly admits to killing Balon, kind of in the same way as Alliser Thorne admitted to killing Jon Snow for the greater good, because here he says he was leading us nowhere and he led us into 2 wars we couldn't win, so sorry I didn't kill him earlier. Then he mentions Daenerys, her dragons, and her lack of husband, and pretty much his plan is to build a fleet to take it to Daenerys, marry her, and then take over the 7 kingdoms together with her, which seems to work for people trying to elect a ruler, so obviously Euron wins. This is where the fact that they are avoiding the magical horns from the books on the show is making me pretty sad. There are 2 magical horns mentioned in A Song of Ice and Fire, if you haven't read the books. One is in the north and it has nothing to do with this, so I'm not going to talk about it right now, but this particular horn that Euron has in the books is called Dragonbinder, and supposedly it controls the dragons, which actually makes his plan more viable. He actually seems like a threat to Daenerys, because if he can control her dragons with his horn, that's a problem. Without the horn, it kind of seems like he's just going to come over with his ships, she's going to take his ships, feed him to the dragons, and move on with her life, because why would she want this random guy? Anyway, Euron is elected, and as he's being reborn from the sea as the king of the Iron Islands, which was a really cool scene, I'm not going to lie, I definitely enjoyed the way they did that part. But what would they do if he didn't come back and actually drowned? Yara and Theon steal their best ships and escape. However, his first line as the king is pretty ridiculous in my opinion. He says, "Where are my niece and nephew? Let's go murder them," and gives a bit of a smirk. That is such a ridiculous, villainous, cheesy thing to say. I really thought they could have at least just left it at "Where are my niece and nephew," because his intentions are so obvious. Of course he wants them dead, or at least imprisoned. He doesn't like these guys. They opposed him. It's clear they don't like each other. Why have this really odd, obvious writing choice? Whatever. In the end, he orders to build 1,000 ships, so he clearly wants to get started on his plan right away. Then we go outside of Vaes Dothrak, where Daenerys is trying to decide what to do with Jorah, because no matter how many times she sends him away, he just keeps coming back. And now she finally finds out about his grayscale, which is escalating. Jorah confesses his love and then tries to leave, but Daenerys stops him and orders him to find a cure. She says, "I command you to heal yourself and then return to me. When I take the 7 kingdoms, I need you by my side." And I actually really enjoyed that scene. I thought it was really well done. It was pretty emotional. By saying this, she definitely gave Jorah hope and purpose, and I do hope that he finds the cure for grayscale, although it's just as likely that he will bring grayscale to Westeros and create more problems for them. But I do hope he finds the cure. I thought this scene communicated that she has forgiven him very well without her actually saying these words, and it was an emotional moment, even though anything emotional in this episode was completely overshadowed by the ending, which I will get to. But if you look at this particular storyline and at the complicated relationship that Daenerys and Jorah have, it's actually a pretty satisfying scene in a way. Meanwhile, at Meereen, it seems like the peace pact with the Masters is working out pretty well. Tyrion, of course, wants to make even more progress as far as the ruling goes, so he brings in a young red priestess, or what looks like a young red priestess. We've seen what happens to Melisandre, so who knows if she's young or not. And this woman believes that Daenerys is the chosen one. Obviously, Varys is pretty reasonably skeptical of this, particularly considering the fact that Stannis was just the chosen one not too long ago, and obviously that didn't work out. But she manages to silence him pretty quickly because she somehow knows these details about his past, and he seemed to be pretty surprised that she knew these things. I'm really curious where they're going to take the storyline. I like that they brought in another red priestess, even though she looks exactly like a younger version of Melisandre down to the outfit and the choker, but I think it's an interesting angle. I just hope she's not going to be the Meereen version of the High Sparrow. I hope they do something else with this. And now let's talk about everything that happened north of the wall this episode and why from now on, if someone asks you to hold the door for them, you just probably will burst into tears. But before all of this happens, we get to find out that Children of the Forest are the ones who actually created the White Walkers to defend themselves. And this is obviously revealed through Bran's vision, and I do hope his visions continue eventually, even though it's kind of not a good time because he screwed up big time. Of course, I'm talking about him going into a vision by himself when everybody else is sleeping and encountering an army of whites led by the 4 horsemen White Walkers, and also the Night King sees him and touches him, which means they can now track him somehow and actually come into the cave. If you remember from the ending of season 4, the cave was kind of a safe zone because the whites could not enter, and I'm assuming the White Walkers couldn't enter either. But now, because Bran has been touched, they can enter. Thanks, Bran. Of course, this means that it's time for Bran and his friends to leave, and as Mira and Hodor are preparing to leave, Bran and the Three-Eyed Raven are in another vision, but the White Walkers, along with their army, show up in front of the cave, and pretty much all hell breaks loose. Mira is trying to wake up Bran so he can work into Hodor and help them escape. The Children of the Forest are trying to slow the White Walkers and the Whites down, which isn't working out very well because there are so many of them. It's a very intense and pretty amazing scene. It was really well done, but I was very stressed out by it. Summer, Bran's direwolf, is killed in the midst of this, which I guess officially means that summer is over and winter is here. The Three-Eyed Raven is killed as well, and by the way, the effect of him just dissipating in the vision was really, really beautifully done. Leaf, the main child of the forest that we've been seeing throughout these episodes, sacrifices herself to slow down the whites, which was actually my least favorite part of that whole scene. It was still well done, but it was just such a typical movie moment, her sacrificing herself to save the important one. It just seemed like a typical movie trope to me, but not a big deal, whatever, because next we find out why Hodor can only say Hodor, and that was such a depressing scene. It was one of the most depressing things I've seen on TV in a really long time, and what makes it even more sad is that he didn't choose to sacrifice himself. Bran was worked into him, and everything just went wrong because he was in the vision and also in the present controlling Hodor, and nobody wants to see Hodor go. He is such a nice guy, he is loyal, and he doesn't have any agenda in the world where everybody has political maneuvers on their mind, and it was definitely very, very sad, and he didn't even get to make that choice. Of course, this is a very well done and beautifully heartbreaking scene, and no matter how sad it is definitely one of the best moments of this season because of how the storytelling turned out and because of the emotional impact. So it's sad, but it's also pretty brilliant. I do wonder how far Bran and Mira are even going to get, because these whites are pretty quick and the White Walkers are riding their zombie horses, and Mira can only drag Bran on that sled so quickly. And also, the Night King touching Bran seems like it means that he can track him anywhere, so there really isn't anywhere that they can hide at this point in the middle of winter. Don't really know where this is going, but I'm assuming something big is going to happen and Bran is going to pull off some kind of miracle. I don't know if he's maybe going to summon the giants or if he is going to be able to control some of the whites. Maybe he can warg into the whites. Who knows, but we'll see, and something definitely needs to happen. Overall, another great episode, even though there were a couple of moments that weren't as great as the rest of the episode. You guys know that I'm not the biggest fan of what's going on at Meereen. I'm just not very interested in all of that right now, and I hope it gets interesting soon. It seems like they're going somewhere, but really, I don't know, and so far they're not selling me on it. Also, didn't really love everything in Braavos. I did enjoy the House of Black and White part and the Hall of the Faces and everything, but the stage performance in particular was pretty awkward and long. And I do hope that Arya's storyline picks up soon, because her character development really has been stuck in one place for a while now. I really want her to go do something else, or at least do something that escalates her as a character. I also wonder, how did the Kingsmoot look to the people who haven't read the books and didn't come into this scene with the expectations that the book readers had, because I feel like I may be a little harsh on that scene because of my expectations. So I would love to know what you guys thought if you haven't read the books. The majority of the episode though was great, so I generally loved it, because any of the nitpicks that I had with it are easily outweighed by all of the good things that happened. And by good, I mean well done things. I don't mean actual good things, because Hodor. That's it for my recap and review of Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 5, The Door. Let me know what you guys thought of this episode. What was your favorite moment? What was your least favorite moment? I feel like I know what everybody's most emotional yet favorite moment is, but you never know. Maybe somebody didn't like it. Let me know what you think about Meereen and the House of Black and White / Braavos situation. Am I the only person who isn't the biggest fan of these? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. And if you did enjoy it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I hope you're having an awesome day, and I will see you soon in my next video. Bye!